Now I'm going to review one game on two different consoles, the arcade and the NES. Bad Dudes vs. the Dragon Ninja, which was created by Data East in 1988, was one of many popular arcade games back in the late 80s. Since they were so popular back then, some companies decided to port some of their games to various console systems like the Nintendo Entertainment System and Sega Master System, then the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis, and so forth. Some games were a huge success like Contra, while others happened to be somewhat disappointing like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 for the NES from its arcade counterpart. This game happens to be below disappointing. In fact, it was really horrible! Before I get into the NES version, I want to talk about the game from the arcade counterpart. The arcade version of this game opens up with this alert message from your commander, who happens to look an awful lot like Duke Nukem, saying that President Ronnie is kidnapped by ninjas. Then he goes on saying, "Are you a bad enough dude to rescue Ronnie?" But wait, hold on for 1 second. First of all, that has to be really weak and corny for the plot of the story. Secondly, who the hell calls the President Ronnie in a serious situation like this? Though I'm pretty sure the person they're referring to was Ronald Reagan, whose term as president ended in 1988. That's like trying to say if Bill Clinton was to be kidnapped by an unknown faction, your commanding officer will most likely tell you, "Are you a bad enough dude to rescue Billy?" Come on, they could have come up with something better than that. Well, after the ridiculous briefing, the game finally begins. For a typical beat-em-up action game, it runs pretty decent. Every time you move a few steps, there are like 4 to 10 ninjas coming at you from every side. All you can rely on is a combination of your attack and jump buttons. Most likely, you'll be using a spinning kick a lot against this many enemies, and especially the bosses. There are also ledges you can jump to or drop from if you need to get away from certain enemies, if your life is low, or need to pick up items that the red ninjas leave behind. Speaking of the items, there are a total of 4 you can get from the red ninjas. First is the sword, then the nunchucks, which is better because it has a longer reach, the soda cans which fill up part of your life, and the clocks that add more time to complete the stage. Every stage you enter, the scenery changes dramatically. In all honesty, it looks good and all that you're seeing in many different settings, but what most people care about is the fighting. You travel from the streets to on top of trucks and trains, a dark forest, and underground through sewers and caves until you get to the main hideout itself. Now, most of the enemies in this game are obviously the blue dress ninjas. They pretty much do nothing special, unless they gang up on you. That's another story. However, the annoying ones throw shurikens at you, try to slash you with their swords, and this is somewhat funny. But the ones who like to play fire so much that they literally set themselves ablaze running at you. The dogs aren't that bad, and the kunoichis are pretty much the same as the blue dress ninjas. The bosses in this game are the real challenge. Every boss fight indeed gets harder. The first boss happens to be the most famous one, named Karnoff. Not only because he shows up in later stages trying to get another shot at you, but get this, he had his own game. Ain't that something? The third boss definitely reminds me of some popular anime character. He likes to do this technique and multiply himself trying to attack you. But as long as you keep using the spinning kick, you should have no problem beating him. The boss I hate the most is the one you fight on the train, because he constantly swings his chain and sickle in the air, and if you try to attack him below, he'll attack you low as well. All I can say is, good luck fighting this guy without getting hit once. The last boss, obviously the Dragon Ninja himself, is both annoying and a coward. You would expect the last boss of any game to be the most difficult challenge ever before completing the game, but no, he is a complete disappointment. First of all, the only way you can damage him is to jump on top of the helicopter, land a few hits, and jump down quickly before he wails at you with his extremely powerful shurikens. He can also hit pretty hard. If this wasn't bad enough, dogs are attacking you from below, so that basically proves how much of a true leader he is. After you beat him, the helicopter lands, and the person coming out happens to be the president himself.
I'm bad!
So for a job well done, what do you receive? A medal? An honor? A reward? Maybe the key to a city? The answer is none of the above. He treats you to a fucking hamburger! What kind of shit reward is this? Going through hordes of ninjas in order to rescue the leader of our great country and receive this. Oh my god, this ending is just plain awful. At least the good news is you got to kick some major ninja ass. Now if you thought this game's beginning and ending was a complete waste of fucking time, wait till you see the gameplay of the NES game. The opening is somewhat similar to the arcade version. No music, but nice colorful graphics on the Nintendo. Then you get to the briefing screen, which I have to say is somewhat better than the arcade version, only because your commander only says President, not President Ronnie. And since this game is made in 1989, the president most likely referred here must be the first George Bush. Afterwards, the game goes completely downhill from here. What is the first thing you see wrong here? It's the animation. You and your enemies are moving somewhat frame by frame-ish. Sometimes you can't tell if you're hitting your opponent or they're hitting you. Do you remember Double Dragon being this bad in terms of animation? I sure as hell don't. One of the very few things about this game, besides the graphics and music, is the number of enemies that appear. Compared to the arcade version, the enemies don't appear that much in numbers, because if they did, I would turn this game off right now and immediately think of many ways to destroy it. Some of the ninjas are a pain in the ass to deal with because they take 2 hits instead of 1 to be taken down. The boss fights can get annoying as well, like when you fight the boss who uses on you. All his clones take 2 hits, which makes the game more frustrating to beat. The worst thing in this version of the game is somewhat similar to Silver Surfer, and that is when you lose all your lives, you start back at the beginning of the stage you were on. When you die, you can choose to continue or not, in which case it really doesn't matter, because as soon as you run out of 3 continues, that's it, the game is over. So basically, all I have to say is this: Bad Dudes Free Arcade gets 2 thumbs up, while the NES version gets 2 middle fingers up. And in terms of numeric rating, the arcade game gets a 7 out of 10 for its decent gameplay, and the NES version gets a horrifying 3 out of 10. The only reason this game didn't get a 0 instead is because the graphics and music were still okay. In the end, play the arcade version, but please stay the hell away from the NES one. It's just better to roast this piece of crap of a game instead. So as I conclude this review, watch this trash be burnt away.